Today, we're digging into a couple of recent Dawn editorials to understand a nation facing pressure from two totally different directions. On one side, you've got this economic crunch that's threatening to squeeze businesses dry. And on the other, there's a judicial issue that's putting its global reputation on the hot seat. So, how does a country even begin to handle a situation like this? Let's get into it. And that's really the big question here, isn't it? How can any country possibly deal with a major money crisis and a fundamental rights crisis at the exact same time? It's an incredibly tricky balancing act, and we're about to see how it's all unfolding in Pakistan. So we're going to break this down by looking at these two challenges happening side by side. First up, we have a really high-stakes financial battle over the national budget. And then we'll switch over to a fight for its international standing when it comes to justice and human rights. Okay, let's dive into the economic front first. This is basically a story of a government that desperately needs cash and a business community that's feeling completely squeezed. It's this huge standoff over something called a super tax. So what's driving all this? Well, it starts with a massive number. Pakistan's Federal Board of Revenue, the FBR, was staring down a tax collection shortfall of 345 billion rupees, and that was just in the first 7 months of the fiscal year. That is a gigantic hole to fill, especially with a super important IMF review right around the corner. And then, boom, the FBR gets what seems like a major breakthrough. A federal constitutional court ruling just wiped out over 2,200 pending legal cases. This basically gave the FBR the green light to go after an estimated 217 billion rupees in unpaid taxes. You can see why they'd see this as a huge chance to plug that revenue gap. But you might be wondering, what exactly is this super tax? It's a key term here. The simplest way to think about it is like an extra tax, a layer on top of what people and companies normally pay. It's specifically aimed at high-income individuals and big corporations, the idea being to raise more money from those who can, most afford it. And this is where you really see the two sides of the coin. You've got the BFR, which needs to collect all this back tax money, like yesterday, to keep the country's finances afloat. But on the other side, businesses are saying, hold on, this money isn't just sitting in a bank account. We've reinvested it into our operations over the years. They're arguing that demanding it all at once could literally put them out of business. And that brings us to another important financial term, working capital. This is pretty much the lifeblood of any company. It's the cash they use for all the day-to-day stuff, like paying salaries and buying supplies. So when they say the tax money was absorbed into their working capital, they mean it's already been spent to keep the business running. Trying to pull it all out now would be like trying to take the fuel out of a car while it's driving down the highway. So, is there a way out of this mess? Well, it looks like there might be a middle ground. The head of the FBR seems to get how tough this would be on businesses, so he's floated a compromise, letting companies pay back what they owe in installments. It would be handled on a case-by-case basis, trying to get the government the money it needs without totally crushing the economy. All right, let's shift gears from the economic front to the judicial one. This is where a whole different kind of pressure is building up. It's not about money, it's about freedom of expression, and the country's entire reputation is kind of hanging in the balance. This quote from a group of UN experts really cuts to the chase. They're drawing a very clear line in the sand. What they're saying is that freedom of speech is for everyone, lawyers included. And just because you exercise that right, it should never, ever be confused with being a criminal, and definitely not a terrorist. So what prompted this strong statement? It's all happening because of the conviction of two lawyers, Iman Mazari Hazer and Hadi Ali Chatha. Their cases have been getting a ton of international attention, and that's why these UN experts decided to step in and make their voices heard. Now, you might be asking, who are these UN special rapporteurs anyway? It's a good question. Basically, they're independent human rights experts. Now, they don't officially speak for the entire UN, but they are appointed by it to act as watchdogs. So when they speak up, their findings and opinions carry a lot of moral and diplomatic authority around the world. People listen. And what it all boils down to is this. The rapporteurs are arguing that the things these lawyers were convicted for should actually be considered protected speech, at least according to international human rights laws. The big worry here is that national laws are being used to punish people for things that are considered a fundamental right on the global stage. So there you have it, two very different, very serious crises happening at the exact same time. One is about the practical realities of money and economics. The other is a deep, principled debate about rights and reputation. Navigating what comes next is going to be an incredibly delicate balancing act. It's a real test for any modern government. So when you really boil it all down, we've looked at two fundamental conflicts. On the money side, it's the need to keep the economy stable versus the government's desperate need for cash. And on the justice side, it's a conflict between enforcing national laws and respecting international human rights. And that leaves us with this final, really big question, one that connects both of these stories and that countries all over the world are grappling with. How does a government strike the right balance between its urgent, immediate need for money and the long-term, fundamental democratic principles that are supposed to define it? There's definitely no easy answer to that one.